Hello, welcome to another episode of Why We Podcast, the panel show. My name is Vik Rajan. I'll be your host. I am also the co-founder of Video Socials. We are a business community of attorneys and accountants, coaches and consultants who come onto our video blogging clubs to get their videos recorded together, fun and done. Now, many of our members also host their own live stream and interview podcasts, and it's a great opportunity for our members to get to know one another. But not everyone is a member that comes on to this show of Why We Podcast, but I do like interviewing other hosts because I get to learn from them. And I'm sure you're going to learn from our two hosts as well today, Sofeya and Grenetta. I'll have them introduce themselves in a moment. The whole premise of this show, you may be new to podcasting, you may have a live stream or been a podcaster for a while. I want us to learn what are the benefits of why we podcast with three populations. There's definitely a benefit to our audience, our viewers, our listeners, people who could be potential clients who work with our businesses. But then there's also a benefit to our guests. We're featuring our guests to be resources and experts for our audiences, but our guests themselves, of course, benefit. They themselves could be utilizing the podcast platform as a marketing vehicle for their practice, for their business. So what are the benefits to their guests? We're going to learn from our guests today. And then finally, there's inevitably a benefit to having your own podcast for your own business as your own marketing vehicle. From a cross-promotion, personal branding, sales and marketing vehicle. There's a variety of benefits personally, let alone that it's a lot of fun to host a podcast, usually if we don't get mired in all the grunt work, which hopefully we'll get to as well. You're laughing. So can you introduce what you do professionally before we even get to the podcast stuff?
Okay, so I'm Sofeya, and I'm an author and coach, and I'm a founder of Imagined Life. And Imagined Life is a system of transformation. So for me, it's all about education and teaching and sharing, and inspiring, empowering people to become their best selves.
So in addition to also hosting a podcast, you're an author of a book. So can you take a minute to tell what is the book about?
Yeah, my book is called Choreography of Awakening, and I used to coach figure skating, so I was a competitive figure skating coach, and my life kind of transformed and shifted in a different direction and became more spiritual, and so I kind of combined spirituality together with psychology and my coaching figure skating into one, and kind of used figure skating as a metaphor for life. And so that's how my book was born. It was kind of like, it started out as a guide for coaches and skaters and parents. And at the end, it became a guide for everyone. And life being a metaphor for a long program of figure skaters, the Olympics just happened, right? So there are certain elements in figure skating that an athlete has to master in order to become a champion. So in the same way, we have certain elements in our life that we have to master to champion ourselves in our lives. So that
You just mentioned the Olympics. How far did you go with your figure skating career?
I went all the way. I coached an Olympic silver medalist.
Excellent. That's awesome. Congratulations. So before we get to Grenetta's work, can you give us an example of that metaphor and a microcosm of how learning and mastering the sport or the skill of figure skating, how does that translate to a coaching practice or to ourselves?
Well, it's translates as a coaching practice. I was a coach.
Right, sure.
So right. So it's all about coaching. And the elements that I was taking on in my book, for example, like number one, as a coach and choreographer, my book was called Choreography of Awakening. So I was seeing as life as choreography, like you choreograph aspects of different elements. And so as a choreographer, the first element is about keeping a beginner's mind, like just stay open, and you don't know what's the next thing ahead of you going to happen. You don't know what you're going to choreograph. So that's the first thing, beginner's mind. And then like the second thing was finding the music, and that would be your why. So if you don't have your why, you can't really proceed and succeed in anything, because if you're just trying to get better without having why, you will find yourself in a place that nothing really matters. So the why is very important, right? And we're all here in the podcast because we have our why.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think going through the moves is not good enough. It's also being in harmony with the music in us. So
Right.
literally, maybe with figure skating, but I know at least figuratively in business. Thank you, Sofeya. Grenetta, Reverend G, how are you doing?
Hi. Hello. I am Reverend Grenetta Mason, aka Reverend G. I am an interfaith, interspiritual minister and a coach. I'm also work as an education administrator. So my show is Conversations with Reverend G. And the premise of it is to come on and have conversations about love, life, and spirituality, but talk about spirituality from a practical point of view. I put it together so that there was a space to really talk about spirituality and how it works in your life. And so on the show, you get to talk about your spiritual journey. And I have something that I like to talk about as a spiritual toolkit. And that would be, what practices do you practice? And it's very personal. And what I've learned, this is my second year doing the podcast, so many different practices work for people. And it's been 2 years of a lot of heartache, strife, uncertainty. So it really worked to have people have tools for that. And so that's the main premise. And for me, I just live a joyous life. I'm happy all the time and making it work. So my goal is to support you in finding joy and living your best life. And I add grace and ease on it because we could just struggle, struggle, struggle and still get to the same place if we could just relax and do it, right? And I know about that through my life, the effort and all the efforting and energy that we put into it. I'm supporting, let's just kind of relax and do it all, and it'll get done in the way that you want to.
So natural flow, divine flow.
Absolutely.
2 years ago, you started your show. Why? Well, what was that aha moment of said, huh, I should start a podcast? Like, what was that? What was going on there for you to have that light bulb moment?
Well, it just came to me. So I didn't. I was a comedian, right? So I've
All
done a
right.
lot of things. I did comedy for a year. I did a comedy show, and then I was good, and so I was like, "Oh, I'm going to be a comedian." So I went on a podcast as a comedian at the same WEMS radio that I am hosted my show through.
Neat.
And one of the people in my group, she just called me up one day and said, "Hey, would you like to do a podcast?" And I was like, "Why not?" But you know what
Sure.
it is, though? I've always had the idea of conversations with the Reverend G. It's just been
Okay.
out there for so long that how it manifested is, this is how it manifested. Because at one point I was doing early morning conversations, early morning readings, every morning, calls, and it's just manifested into this being a great medium, and it worked out. I'm so grateful. I don't have to go into a studio to do it, and I can get to so many people through this medium here. And the grace and needs part for me is sitting here, right?
Yeah.
And being able to present that. So that's what my show is about. It addresses like the real issues, but at the same time, I always say, can you find a moment of joy? Can you find moments of joy throughout whatever you're going through? So that's what it's about. And it's fun.
Well, that is should be the core, right? So,
Yeah.
what are the kind of guests that you have on, and what are some of the conversations that you've had?
I tell you, I've gone through my whole list of people. Everybody's been on my show.
Sure.
Doctors, lawyers. I was going to say Indian doctors, lawyers. I've had teachers. I've had artists. I've gone through everybody that I know, right? and said, "Oh, you're all welcome," because I feel everybody has a story to share. I feel that we all have something to share. And I've just given the platform to everybody. And it's interesting when I invite people on my show, they're like, "Oh, I feel special." Yes, you are special. And it makes me feel great that they really appreciate that I say, "Oh, come and do my show," right?
Sure. Yeah.
So everybody can be on my show, mothers, right? Because we all have a story and we all have a spiritual experience and a spiritual journey. And so that's everybody, anybody,
And
everybody, right? And we all can share. And
like
it
literally
doesn't
everybody and their
diminish
mother.
anybody.
And I want to hear Sofeya's answer for that as well. But before I get to her, Grenetta, you mentioned that when you talk to your guests, you're bringing out practical examples of spirituality or spiritual practice. Can you give us an example of a practical example of a spiritual practice? What do you mean by that? And can you share something that a guest maybe has shared?
Okay, so I'll give you both. So meditation, we all meditate. We all have our way of doing meditation. That's a practice that you could use.
Sure.
Praying is a practice that you could use, but also art, painting is a practice that you could use. Taking a walk in the park. So we all get to create the practices that bring us the peace, the practices that center us. When you need a moment of clarity, what would you do? What practice is in your toolkit? What do you pull out at moments when I know I get sad? So what do? I live it for a moment, but I'm quickly trying to move out of it into another space.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by the practices that support you day by day. And some people, and I said, as I said on the show, I've gotten so many great responses from people about the different practices that they do.
Like what? Have you, like, do you remember any of those responses? Because it's always nice to hear from listeners and viewers of what they've gotten from the
So
show.
it's writing is one,
Yeah.
singing, and for me, I love singing the gospel choirs. And now I'm not in a choir, but I sing gospel music every day, and that centers me and focuses me. Music is one of the things that in the typical journaling, the typical meditation. I call them typical because a lot of people know about journaling, meditation, and prayer. Those are the three main ones. But what I'm hearing for people is a gratitude practice, or just loving everybody. And it's very interesting when I ask, what are your top three spiritual practices in your toolkit? It just varies from guest to guest. The creatives all talk about their creativity.
Right.
And I've had creatives on the show. So it's been different answers,
Yeah.
because the people in my guests, I've had my daughter's young friends on, and it's so cool, right? To be able to get 20, 30, 40-year-olds on the show, right? And then to get the range.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Sofeya, what was the starting point for the show that you hosted? Can you walk us through like how that happened and the journey of it and why that occurred?
Well, actually, I've been on a lot of shows as a guest, and I said always, people would ask me, "Are you gonna do a podcast?" There's no way. I like being a guest, and
What was the no way? What was the hesitation? Like, what was going through your mind? And you said, no.
Well, because I could see that it takes a lot of dedication. For example, like the first show that I was guest on was Entrepreneur on Fire, if you know what that
Sure,
was.
You on Fire, yeah.
So an Entrepreneur on Fire, John Z. Loomis, right?
Yeah, John Lee Loomis.
Yeah.
Yo Nation.
I mean, well, it's a huge podcast, right?
It is. I want to say it's in like the top 50 podcasts in the world.
And I was like in his top 10 episodes for a long time. Yeah. But I was watching him and I could see how he was doing this day after day after day. I mean, to build 800,000 downloads per month, it takes some time. And it takes a lot of dedication. And so I could see that it was taking that. So I was like, I don't.
Yeah, right. So that was more discouraging than inspirational. The overwhelm.
To do it myself.
Correct.
It wasn't because, it's not because I didn't want that. It just wasn't particularly my area.
Sure.
And so I was, and I was an Olympic coach. So what that means is, if I do something, it has to be Olympic level. It's not something that I'm just going to do it for a little bit and then I'm not going to do it. If I do it, I do it.
Right.
So that's why. So for me, it wasn't like becoming a podcaster. For me, it's like either you become like someone like John DeLumas or don't do it.
So then what changed? Go for the gold. What changed?
Well, I had a client. One of my clients, he is my clients with my coaching. He is my coaching client, and he had a group, and he has a podcast, and he said, "Can you do me a favor, please? Please, you've got this amazing energy that you have. You'd be such an amazing host for my podcast. Can you please take it over? It's only once a week for 20 minutes." He's like, "It's not going to take a lot of your time. Just 20 minutes a week. Once a week. You can do it. It's going to help you in your business too. Can you do that?" So I'm like, okay, let me see. I mean, 20 minutes. Sure.
You got 20 minutes. We've all got 20
right,
minutes.
exactly. Yeah. 20 minutes, right? But there is a difference between 20 minutes man and 20 minutes woman.
Okay. What does that mean? What does that mean? There we go.
It takes.
I'm not disputing, but I'm inquiring. What does that mean?
You just go like, okay, I'm ready. Here,
I'm ready. I throw some water in my hair and I throw a sweater over my undershirt, and here I am.
Yeah. How long does it take you, Vik, to put your lashes on, for example?
Yeah. These I've got pretty nice eyelashes, so let's not go there.
I understand. It's sort of like the look, right?
Yeah.
So it started going. I mean, this is already the next thing, right? Not to mention, you have to find your guests. You have to invite them. You have to police them.
What do you mean by policing them?
I'm not policing.
Well, policing guests. Policing guests means making sure they send you their photo. They send you your bio. Then they don't care about how they send you the bio. They just send you 5 pages long thing, and you have to spend like 2 days going through their bio, figuring out what's the best thing to showcase them. Because these people that coming in onto your podcast, the guests, they are doing it for, they have a purpose, they have their why, they have their business, and I want to promote them and show them in their best light.
Correct.
And so I have to dig through the stuff that they sent me to present them in the best way.
Yeah.
So that takes time.
It does take time. So that's more than 20 minutes of the live show.
Well, also, after you put so much energy in preparing, then you have to market. They don't share the links. So you have to keep reminding them, share.
So somebody's got to obviously thank the guests and send them the show links and send them the social media links, the podcast links, remind them gently, then not so gently, because it's in their benefit to share the episode, right?
Yes,
because it's their PR, it's personal branding, their marketing. Usually guests are excited to share the episode, but we all get busy, and sometimes, some people are more social media savvy than others, to put it that way, right? So they don't even know how necessarily if they're not, online so much. So fair enough. So who had to do that? That fell on you.
So all of that took a little bit more than 20 minutes. So
yeah.
At the time I was
on average, how many hours, or and I don't want to say that it took hours, how much time did it take on a week-to-week basis?
How much time it took?
Yeah, do you think? Like at the end,
each episode?
Yeah.
I would say a good day and a half.
Wow.
So are you saying like 10 to 15 hours? Right? Day is not 24 hours. You're talking like a work day, right?
once you do the episode too, then you have to also edit the episode a little
Sure.
bit. You have
Sure.
to share it on YouTube and
Yeah.
other platforms and stuff. And that
Yeah.
takes
I mean,
time as well.
I know what you're talking about. I mean, I don't know literally. I've got Sarah backstage that I'm
Right.
sure is laughing to herself because absolutely we know as a
Right.
company all
And then you
the
have to
stuff
write
that
up
takes on.
the
And so
description.
you're saying like it's hours and hours and hours every week, and then it's rinse and repeat, right? Because like so you're doing it weekly. Was there any time that you said, "Oh, I don't want to do it weekly"? What was the benefit to you to even keep up with it weekly, as opposed to saying, I'm just going to do this every other week or monthly? Or what was the impetus to say, you're in? It wasn't just kind of go for the gold, kind of like what it takes. But I don't want to put words in your mouth, Sofeya. Why did you commit to weekly, and stick with weekly?
Why did I?
Yeah.
Okay, one more time. Why did I stop? Is that
No. Why did you commit to doing your show weekly and not scale it back?
Well, at first I thought, well, let me just see. And the second thing I thought, what can I learn from this? And I've learned a ton. And also picking up all these bios and figuring out what works, what doesn't work, that really helped me to learn more about how I'm marketing moving forward, my own self as well.
Yeah.
So that was very helpful. It was, what else? Well, of course, when you're podcasting and everyone wants to be a guest. So if you want to build your email list, hey, this is the greatest way to build your email list. 100%.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
much easier to get people come in and put their name and email in your form.
Yeah.
So because people want to be in a podcast.
Yeah.
So that was helpful. It was helpful introducing the podcast. I could also introduce the product that I've created, my own business.
Oh, good.
So that was also helpful.
Yeah.
And of course, meeting different people, seeing how people present themselves, what works, what doesn't work. I mean, for me, as a psychologist and a coach, I analyze everything, seeing what motivates people, why they do what they do, because all of that together helps me to come and help my clients better.
Yeah.
So that was all wonderful. Yeah.
That's tremendous. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't, as much as that's very discouraging, the amount of hours that it can take on a week-to-week basis can be extremely discouraging. In about a minute, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and I'd love for viewers and listeners who are thinking to themselves, how can I possibly keep up with this on a week-to-week basis? Well, we have a solution for you. Sofeya was not a plant for this purpose, but nonetheless, my company literally does create a video interview podcast for our clients. So you just show up at showtime. We'll get to that in a minute. But before we get there, Grenetta, Reverend G, I'd love for you to share, how has the podcast helped you? Sofeya kind of explained some of the value and benefits that it's given to her, and how it translates to her career as a coach and her business. How has your podcast helped you in addition to your guests and your audience?
Well, it's helped me in being able to give them the space, right? And in being of service and supporting others means a lot to me. So it has helped me in that way. I haven't taken it to the point of where I like monetized it, and that will be a next step.
Yeah.
But I'm still at the point of it's fun. I'm not working hard.
It's emotionally fulfilling.
Yes,
we should definitely chat.
Yeah.
The podcast should also be economically fulfilling.
Right. And so that's why I was saying it's 2 years now, the next level to it, and I'm ready for that. But one thing about me is I want the ease of it. So I just show up for my podcast.
Yeah.
And it's so free and so open. I do an hour's worth of work, right? The work is to say, please send me your photos. That's one thing you have to do for the promo. Then I'll look at your LinkedIn, I'll look at these things to get an idea. But when I go in, I don't go in with anything. I say my only 2 questions are about the spiritual journey and the toolkit. But everything else is about you, the guest, in the moment. What do you want to share? How can you inspire? So I say we want to touch, move, and inspire people. How can you inspire them if you are? I had a doctor friend that came on and talked about COVID. It was the best show because he made people feel comfortable about it. He made them feel as though he was giving them good information. So there were so many aspects to that particular show that was very positive. So each show is different. And
Yeah.
the impact for me is knowing that people are getting something from the show.
Right. And the more you give to others, the more you get in return. And that's powerful in and of itself. We're going to take a quick commercial break in a moment. When we come back, I'd love for each of you to kind of share two things. One, we'll definitely end because I want people to find where they can learn, where they can find your show and where they can watch it, where they can listen to it, previous episodes, if not currently. But then right when we come back, I'd love for you to share and put a spotlight on another podcast that you listen to. If you're a raving fan of another host that you know well, I'd love for you to share about that show and why you're a fan of that show. But before we get to that, let's take a quick commercial break and be economically fulfilled as well.
Do you want your own podcast like this one? My team will do all the grunt work for you. Just show up, smile, and enjoy talking to your potential clients and referral relationships. Go to videosocials.net/govip to watch our 9-minute webinar for all the details. Are you a busy lawyer, coach, consultant like me? You should have a podcast done for you to get you more clients, impress your colleagues, and it becomes your perpetual referrals flywheel. We find you the right guests. We schedule your guests, handle all the podcast tech, get you into Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and more. Done for you. Go to videosocials.net/govip to watch our 9-minute webinar for all the details. Now back to the show.
And back to our guests. And hopefully our done for you video interview podcast service, our Video Socials VIP, is the answer to all the hassle that Sofeya has been through and may be scaring our viewers and listeners, but looking forward to figuring that out as well. So that aside, Sofeya, where can people watch and listen to the episodes? Yeah, I can't hear you.
Okay,
So where can we watch and listen to your podcast?
Okay, you can find my podcast on YouTube.
Excellent. What should we type in?
A good question. So I think it's under my name, Sofeya SaRah Joseph.
Okay. So if you're watching this, Sofeya SaRah Joseph, and if you're listening, Sofeya spelled Sofeya. Your middle name is Sarah, which is Sahra. Last name Joseph. So
yes, probably Sofeya Joseph. I think it's under my YouTube, Sofeya Joseph. Yeah.
And the name of your show again?
The show is Professionals on Air.
Professionals on Air. So if we type in your name, we type in Professionals on Air. Great. Are you also distributed through podcast platforms?
No,
like Apple,
not yet. No,
okay, not yet.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We'll definitely chat about that.
Yeah.
Reverend G, what about you? How can people watch and listen to your show?
You can watch my show every Monday night from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. on WEMS Radio Live. It is on Facebook Live. It is on YouTube Live. And it's also on the WEMS Radio app.
Cool. That's really awesome. And is it also available on other apps, other podcast platforms? Not yet?
I think Twitch. Is that one?
On Twitch? No, okay, that's a very specific one.
Yeah.
But not on Apple, not on Spotify yet.
No, I don't think so.
Cool.
I'll check that out. No.
And before we wrap up, I'd love to hear from each of you. Sofeya, are you a podcast junkie like I am? Do you listen to a lot of podcasts?
I don't listen to a lot of podcasts.
Are you a fan of anyone else's show?
Well, of course I am a fan of Entrepreneur on Fire. As a
sure. Is there a host that you know well that you could spotlight?
Yeah, but I am a fan of Think About It podcast.
Tell me about
Think About It.
Tell me about it. What is Think About It?
Well, it's run by this guy. His name is Johnny Williams.
Hmm.
Well, he's a client of mine,
Excellent,
and
even better.
he's a great author, and he is so awesome with words and his insight of how he's seeing things. He always finds a way to see things from a completely different perspective. So it's very unique,
I'm putting you
and
on the spot, but that's a pretty profound statement to make about Johnny. Is there an example that comes to mind of what, how he's seen something from a different perspective? Can you remember anything?
well, he would take words
Okay,
and then he would split the word in like pieces and show what this word means in a way that you would never look at it that way.
okay,
I mean, right now it's hard for me to like just boom come up with an
okay. I'm putting you on the
example. The
spot
only
for an
one that
example.
I'm
All
thinking
right,
of.
but we should definitely we can look him up. So
Yeah.
Johnny, what's Johnny's last name?
So his podcast is called Think About. Let me
Think about
just
it.
yeah, Think About It podcast. It's Think About It podcast dot info.
.info. Think about it. Podcast.info. Excellent.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's I mean, that's a very, very intriguing. I'm looking forward to getting to know him. Reverend G, are you a podcast junkie?
No,
I'm the only
I don't
podcast junkie.
listen to podcasts.
So, but
Right?
are you a fan of anyone else's show?
No, wait a
Only you're a
minute.
fan of your own.
I'm a fan of my
Oh, you are
own
but you are a frequent guest on other people's shows.
Yeah,
Who,
I know.
whose show were you on that?
I do. I would
who's-
like to highlight a show, if,
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
and it came to mind for me because I have watched the show a couple of times, but I'm not a podcast person. And I had her on my show, and her name is Sage Hewitt, and she's a trans woman. And they do a podcast on unbinding the binary. Unbinding the
Unbinding the
binary.
binary. Is that the name of her show?
Yes.
Unbinding the binary.
Yes. And what I like about it is the education, the just having people feel comfortable with the whole world. And I love that they're out there doing the show. Educating people is the main thing.
Sure.
And then to even bring other people on into the community where they feel that they could express their story. So I would like to highlight that show.
Good for you. No, that's excellent. Thank you for highlighting her show, Unbinding the Binary.
Yeah.
That's tremendous. I mean, I find that the more we listen and the more we learn from others who are in the craft and in the business of running their own live stream or podcast, the more we benefit our audience when we host our own show, which is the reason why I wanted to bring both of you on, for me to learn and for our audience to learn from each of you as resources and role models, so that we can see not only the struggles, but the benefits of having our own podcast. And it's ultimately a lot of fun of why we podcast, but it can also be a very profitable spiritually, emotionally, but also economically. So thank you, Sofeya. Thank you, Reverend G.
All right. Thank you for having me.
And again, you can watch this podcast, Why We Podcast, as a live stream on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube just about every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can catch previous episodes and listen to it on just about every major podcast platform: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. Again, my name is Vik Rajan. I've been your host. I'm also the co-founder of Video Socials. I'm looking forward to getting to know you and your podcast idea. I'll see you soon.
Thank you.